Welcome to CosmoFactory, a podcast by Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna, where we explore the entire cosmetics, personal care, and fragrance industry supply chain. I'm your host, Deanna Utrusky, and here at CosmoFactory, we look beyond the trends to discover the ideas, initiatives, and innovations that are truly advancing beauty. Let's get started. This episode is about scalable wild harvesting. It's about illicit crop substitution in Colombia. It's about developing sustainable economies that can help preserve the Amazon rainforest. And it's about a natural oil with desirable sensorial attributes and anti-aging skincare benefits. On today's episode of the CosmoFactory podcast, my guest is Camilo Bueno, co-founder and managing director of Cary-O. Welcome.
Hi, Diane. Thanks for the invitation and having me here.
Absolutely. Glad to chat with you. Let's get started, if you don't mind, just by introducing us to the company you lead. Tell us about Cary-O.
Okay, so Cary-O comes from the scientific name of Cacay. Cacay is a nut from the Amazon, and the scientific name is Cariodendron orinosense. There's where the name Cary-O comes from. And Cacay is a native tree to the Amazon rainforest. It's an amazing tree up to 40 meters tall. And the nut that this tree produces and the oil inside the nut is an incredible oil for skincare purposes. It's an oil that has been anciently being used by the indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest to heal wounds. And this is how the community in Colombia in the cosmetic industry got to know about the potential use of the oil from the cacao nut in the international cosmetic industry.
Yeah, no, that makes very good sense. Thank you. And let's think about wild harvesting too. How does your company define that term? What does it mean?
Yeah, wild harvesting is very different to what the normal agriculture does. In Colombia, the big part of Colombia is nature, is still, rainforest, and especially the Amazon rainforest. So in the rainforest, many people look the rainforest and the Amazon just as plants, trees, CO2 storage. But actually, the Amazon is a fabric of many different products. It's the products that the different animals inside of the jungle use to survive, right? And also the indigenous communities.
Mhm.
So you can go inside the jungle and meet many different products, like, for example, acai, copaiba, or cacay oil, right? From the cacao nut. And what we do is that we go to the Amazon rainforest, we connect with indigenous communities, and the indigenous communities that know about cacao already inside the jungle, and we help them with some infrastructure that is needed for the cacao harvesting, and they start collecting the wild cacao nut from the ground during the harvest. This is between March and May.
Uh-huh.
And this wild harvest of cacao, they dry it, they process it, and then we make the cacao oil with a cold pressing method. This
Mhm.
is very different to any other agriculture practice where you are really doing a plantation or a multi-crop plantation. This is completely different. This is really going to nature, to the jungle, to the rainforest, and using the products that this rainforest produce.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. As you know, and many of our listeners know, I'm personally a proponent of what I like to think of as industry transparency. So I do just want to mention that when your company was first established, to prove the concept of cacao oil, you did transition some land that had been used for cattle raising into a plantation there where you're located in Colombia. But now more recently, with the demonstrated market value and some international partnerships, Cary-O is working, as you've described, with the indigenous peoples to source the ingredient through wild harvesting. So just let me know, do I understand that correctly?
Exactly. And this comes from a particular situation in Colombia, and is that we don't really know our biodiversity, even though that we are the richest country in biodiversity per square meter in the world. So what happened? Look, people here in Colombia look to the Amazon as a sort of jungle somewhere, very far away from the city. And there were many research about the products that the Amazon rainforest has, and there was Cacay involved. And what was the mentality or the strategy of the people that were first working with Cacay? They thought, okay, let's bring this wild tree from the Amazon to a plantation. Let's
Right.
make a plantation, right? And this is how everything started. The industrialization of Cacay started really as bringing Cacay to a plantation, right? And that's where also we started.
Sure.
We decided to transform the cattle farming in our farm to Cacay forests. And at the beginning, it was great. I was very motivated, but then I started to feel, okay, I do see that there has been a positive environmental impact through this transformation of cattle farming to cacao forests. But in the end, we were only just one family. We were just one farm. And I wanted the impact to be bigger. And I did know during that time about these uh, wild forest economies, right?
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, if people are working with forest economies, like for example, for timber production, sustainable timber production, that the main goal of these forest economies is making the rainforest more profitable than grass fields for cattle or a coca plantation. Why shouldn't we think about actually implementing cacao oil and producing cacao oil out from this wild harvest? Because our goal in that moment, when we started to think about it, was okay, we have been planting many trees, but meanwhile, the Amazon rainforest is burning. And it's burning because people are looking for opportunities, are looking for making some kind of industry, right?
Right.
But what if we make and we achieve that the rainforest is more profitable than grass fields? And this is where we started to work together with botanic people and the environmental engineers and so on to look, okay, where in the Colombian Amazon is Cacay really? And there is where we landed to a specific town in the south, very far away from Colombia, a town called Miraflores, a town known in whole Colombia because of the history with coca production, armed conflict, and so on. And we started in 2022 to develop this wild cacao project that was
Yeah.
meant to be just focused on wild cacao, working with communities and working for protecting the Amazon rainforest thanks to a sustainable wild cacao forest economy.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. And I believe you've partnered with a German government agency now known as the German Society for International Cooperation. It's called GIZ, which is, an acronym based on the agency's German language name, which I am not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce. But as one might expect, the GIZ operates to support international cooperation for sustainable development. Tell us more about that partnership and how you're working with them.
Yeah, sure. So exactly, this is the German Agency for International Cooperation, the GIC, or in German Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. So this is
Beautiful.
different. And when we first came to this region in 2022, we were just like a small project. No one in the region knew that there could have been developed a forest economy. No one came before with this idea. And we arrived there and we started to look for these wild cacao trees. And what we found was just absolutely amazing. Concentrations of huge and giant cacao trees inside of the jungle and communities that were living under really hardcore poverty conditions, right? So there is where we decided, okay, we have to do something. It was not easy to decide it because we had already one farm of cacao, right? Our family farm. And usually everyone would think, no, let's put all money in our farm. It's our production, belongs to us, and so on. Our opinion was it doesn't matter. There we have such an opportunity to making an impact and preserving the Amazon rainforest through forest economies, and in this case, wild cacao forest economy. So we decided to start officially the wild cacao project next year, so in 2023, with one family. We
Okay.
just started to work with one family to see how it will work and if it could be a larger project in the future. It was a complete success, and this is why in the end of 2023, we decided, okay, we want the project to get bigger, to grow it, and we want to incorporate more families, and we want to bring these families the infrastructure. So in this case, solar dryers, so that they can really harvest and dry the cacao nuts. But we didn't have the money for that
Mhm.
because we already were using all the money in our farm, creating the company, clinical studies, many things that were very expensive. So we didn't have money to just sponsor solar dryers to dozens of families. And this is where we decided to go to the GIC, because they are known for helping these kind of projects worldwide. So I went there, I did the presentation of the project, and directly they were in love with the project and
Yes.
with the idea. We started to develop the project together, also considering all the restrictions and all the conditions that such an important entity has. And then we launched the project officially in 2024, February.
Okay.
And since then, we have already incorporated over 80 families, and we already are protecting legally for more than 4,000 hectares of native Amazon rainforest, thanks to this project and thanks to this cooperation between a company and a public entity like the GIC.
Mhm. No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Excuse me, I imagine there's still opportunity to grow even further. Is that true?
Sure. And we can grow the project further very quickly with a huge impact. The main thing in this situation is the market. We need to develop a bigger market, right? Because I can incorporate as much families as I want. This German entity wants to support us as far as they can, and they really can support us in a bigger way. But the big question is, okay, right now we're working with 80 families. If we want to work with 500 families, do we have the market for the cacao oil that we would be producing? And the answer right now is, for such an amount of families, no.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and also because cacao oil is quite new, it's
Sure.
quite trendy. So we are first working on developing the market, and we are very happy because we have already developed very important clients in Europe, in the US. We
Mhm.
are working already with some of the most important distributors in the world, and this is something that makes us very proud of. And if we continue working like this and convincing many different laboratories, cosmetic manufacturers to incorporate cacao oil in their formulations, we can really have a larger impact in the Amazon rainforest, and not only in the rainforest, but also in the communities that are living there under really difficult poverty conditions.
Yeah, no, and it's very important to make that connection between demand and sustainability outcomes. That's super helpful. Let's quickly describe, if you will, cacao oil as product developers or cosmetic scientists might think about it. What are some of the benefits or attributes there?
Okay, cacao oil is especially an incredible ingredient for skincare formulations, because it has a silky texture, it's very fast absorbing, and it leaves a really nice feeling on the skin. And the like first is the sensorial side. The sensorial side is just amazing. Using it pure or in a facial oil or in a serum or a cream, you really see a difference if you, for example, develop a cream or a serum using argan oil or cacao oil. If it's a serum with cacao oil, it's much lighter, it absorbs way quicker.
Hmm.
The feeling itself is way better. So this sensorial part is very important. Like this silky texture is something that laboratories are really looking to incorporate in the formulations. And then the other side is the benefits to the skin. Cacay oil has proven anti-aging benefits. We have carried out already some clinical studies in Germany in a very known laboratory there, and the results in this clinical study are very promising. And we tested elasticity, skin fatigue resistance, reduction of wrinkle depth, and increase in hydration. And really, in all cases, there were remarkable results in these studies. So if you incorporate cacao oil in a formulation, then you will have a great sensorial benefit and also a benefit to the skin, especially in anti-aging purposes, improving skin tone, because it really is great for improving skin tone and bringing hydration.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to hear those details. For brands and formulators listening, they're also thinking about the quality of an ingredient, the consistent, is it consistently high quality? Is it consistently a particular purity? If folks might be wondering if weather or rainfall will impact harvest for a company like yours. Can you speak to that briefly?
Yeah, sure. Cacao, like any other vegetable oil, has like very big things to consider. And for example, in the case of cacao, it falls to the ground naturally between March and May. And the crop, the nut is so it is planted that this nut with the humidity of the Amazon rainforest and the temperature starts creating the root and
Mhm.
later on creates a cacao plant, right? And this can be a process that can happen in 1 week after the cacao fruit falling to the ground. So first, there has to be a really responsible work in collecting the cacao nuts. You have to go every day to the jungle and collect the fruits from the ground and directly bring it to the farm and start drying the cacao nut. If you don't dry the cacao nut directly, the nut will be already starting to oxidate. So, and if the cacao nut oxidates, you will see it in the cacao oil. It will have a rancid aroma, and the peroxide value will be incredibly high. So you really have to go every day to collect the cacao fruit. You have to start drying it directly. You need the solar dryers. These solar dryers are like big beds with a net, and they put the nut inside on top of the net, and it's covered by a plastic cover. And because if you let that the nuts get wet because of rainfall and so on, they will really oxidate very quick. So then this solar drying system, after the cacao nut has been dried properly, then the work is easier. Then the nut is in good conditions, in a low humidity, and then you can transport it, in our case, to Bogota. And in
Mhm.
Bogota, we carried out cold pressing to produce the cacao oil. This cold pressing is very, very important, and not just cold pressing on this under 60 degrees, really as lower as we can so that we can preserve the antioxidants in the cacao oil. In the plant where we produce the oil, we have to carry out a selection, visual selection and manual selection from the nuts, because when you really open the nut when it arrives to Bogota, in our case, is where you really see if the nut is good or not.
Mhm.
If you don't do that, it's very probable that you will be incorporating in the cold pressing some nuts that are already oxidated, and this will have an impact on the cacao oil. So we have been focused on developing a product that is especially meant for high-end markets like Europe, Korea, Japan, US.
Mhm.
And this is why every task that we do and every process in the production of the cacao oil.
Supply chain ethics are, of course, also very important. And you had mentioned earlier in our conversation that cacao nuts have been used for treating wounds and such by local populations. But I believe it's also been used as a food. I'm hoping you can explain maybe how you're ensuring that beauty makers are not asking these people to give up a food source. Obviously, they can't eat what they're selling. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because, and I appreciate, because it's very important that everyone makes as much questions as possible when it's something related to sustainability. In the case of cacay, cacay nut has been used by indigenous communities since always for nutrition purposes, right? During the harvest season, they eat the cacay nut all the time,
Mhm.
but they just consume one small portion of the production of the rainforest around them. Because as I mentioned before, if you don't dry it very quickly, the nut gets oxidated. And they don't have these solar dryers that we are providing them. So the big and large amount of production of cacao is just a waste in the ground in the end.
Mhm.
And there are many concepts that we also need to consider because, for example, okay, if the cacao nuts that the indigenous communities were not eating stayed there under the tree, then the nut tree, like these nuts were in the end food to the tree, right? And if we take them out, then there will be a sort of deficit.
Right. It changes the nutrition of the soil.
Exactly. And there are two very big things to consider. The very first one is to know that if anyways we don't do anything with this cacao, people are going to deforestate so
Yes.
slowly, right?
Yes.
And if we want it to be perfect from the beginning, then we would take too long to start, and this rainforest that we are working with would be already grass fields, right? So these were the decision of, okay, what we are doing is already great, giving value to this rainforest. Then let's start analyzing everything that can happen during the process. And one important thing is this like nutritional benefit, a deficit long term if we don't do anything around it. So what we are doing right now is that we work with the communities so that they use the shells of the cacao because the cacao has a shell,
Mhm.
so that they use the shell and also other organic waste to produce compost, and they bring this compost back to the tree. So there's no deficit in it under the tree, and the tree can produce cacao nut like every year. So
Yeah.
these are some of the things that we are considering and we are analyzing. It's great that at least we are working with this German Agency for International Cooperation, and since this year we are working also with the Instituto Humboldt, is the most important research institute in Colombia, and with them we analyze all these kind of aspects so that we don't have any negative impact.
I'm hoping you can help us think about what beauty industry suppliers can learn from Cary-O about how to realize these more sort of environmentally harmonious opportunities. What can we take from your company and scale it, I think, in other spaces?
Yeah, the first thing is to be open-minded and to be really wanting to look for something new with a large impact. Because in many cases, we arrive to a laboratory or a distributor, and they are not really interested into new things. They just want to work with bulk volumes. So, for example, olive oil in really large amounts, sweet almond oil, and they don't want to work like with this yeah, with this kind of specialities, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So I would like to invite them to be more open-minded and interested into developing new stuff, right? The second thing is the companies need to educate their workers and their team around sustainability so that they really understand about sustainability, because in some cases we want to convince a client, but they don't even understand what they are doing, what we are doing. So this is something that is very important. What for me is the most important thing is that people don't focus more on certifications than on a story, because it happens a lot that you arrive to a client, to a distributor or a contract manufacturer, and they ask you, okay, are you organic certified? Are you fair trade? Are you Rainforest Alliance? And so on and so on and so on. What they don't know is that these certifications are extremely expensive, and sadly, they don't really look at what we are doing, and we have seen it already. It's incredible. In some cases, you just have to fill like a formula, right? A form,
Yes.
and that's it. And you just have to pay. And in the end, because we don't have these certifications, then they say, okay, no, 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 we cannot work if it's not fair trade. We cannot work if it's not Rainforest Alliance, and so on. And this is something very important, that they know that under every project there is a story, and this story is more important than any certification. It's more important to really get to know the team, your partner, your provider, and the place where they are working, than just looking to the certifications. Because really, the certifications, in my opinion, they have been really a struggle to any of these kind of small projects that want to develop, but in the end, when they are, in the end, wanting to enter a larger market, than the large companies, they just can work and want to work with certified products.
But to your point, simply because a company doesn't display, all 25 or whatever of the most sort of on-trend certifications, doesn't mean that they're not doing very important work in terms of sustainability, and doesn't mean that their product isn't high quality or isn't fully traceable. And that's very interesting to think about. I appreciate your sharing that perspective for sure.
Yeah, and I would like to add something there, and it's, we have acknowledged this problem, and we cannot change the industry from one day to another. So we accepted the challenge, right, of not having the money to do all these kind of certifications. So what I do is that I really bring the customers to a trip to the Amazon,
Yeah.
right? So, through videos, pictures and videos where my team is involved, so that they really see we are there directly working with the communities. And through a great presentation and a great storytelling and a lot of passion and feeling, we convince these people for sure that this project is just something different.
Yeah.
And already different very important clients, they have already said and thought, okay, we don't need a certification, like this project has everything we need, and they want to sponsor the project right now. We have some clients, for example, our distributor in Germany, they are sponsoring the project next year with 5 solar dryers. So 5 different families would get a solar dryer, and this means for each family, at least they will conserve 50 hectares of native Amazon rainforest. So, and through really a good storytelling and bringing the people close to the project, we have been able to fight like this complexity of all the certification issues.
Yeah. Yeah. No, excellent. Thank you for that. And I have to say, I'm very happy you were able to join me here on the CosmoFactory podcast. Thank you, Camilo, for an inspiring conversation.
No, Diane, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and it would be a dream to see many more and more and more brands in the future incorporating Cacay Oil and seeing the inky name Cary-O Orinocense seed oil in their inky list.
Thank you so much for listening. If you find the CosmoFactory podcast useful, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and share your thoughts, so even more cosmetic industry professionals can discover the CosmoFactory. I'm Deanna Utrusky. Please join me again next Tuesday for a new episode of the CosmoFactory podcast.